Cool. So, my name is Jeff Kruchkow. I'm going to talk to you about taking judge calls, which is sort of nebulous. It's more going to be focused on like best practices and setting up a script, which is the guy who certified me for L1, Andy Thompson, was his biggest piece of advice to me was get a good, consistent script for taking your judge calls and just do that every time. Because then you don't forget anything, and it's much harder to mess stuff up when it's more automatic for the parts that don't matter, which is basically the parts that aren't figuring out the answer to the player's question is fine to be automatic because those should be mostly the same every single time. You don't need to worry about them. If they're the same every time, you can focus on answering their question, figuring out your penalty, etc., etc. So I've divided my script thing into 3 parts, which is just a beginning, middle, end. Pretty simple. The beginning is you're going to enter your judge call. So the players have called for a judge. You're going to come up to the table. You need to greet the players. My default has been of late, hello there players, what can I help you with? Short and it's easy. You're letting them know you're here. They can begin talking to you. You don't want to just walk up to the table and hope they're going to start saying things to you because they'll just stand there awkwardly staring at you for a bit. You want to make very clear when the call starts and then also when the call ends. This is one area that I've definitely seen some feedback for judges and from judges of try and keep your language inclusive for this. So I would not suggest, for example, hey guys, what can I help you with? As going in, which is why I go with players. I remember there was a little bit of pushback against, hey friends, what can I help you with? Because that seemed overly familiar. That doesn't bother me, but I mean, that's something to be aware of that has been said. And then the next part of that, you've said hello. Oh, that was the other thing. If you are, this is a piece of feedback I got from John. When he's doing appeals, which may or may not apply to some of you differentially, he likes to get the player's names specifically there because that tends to be a slightly heightened tension situation when they're already appealing. So directly addressing players can kind of help calm things down. It's up to you or not if for your generic judge calls you want to pick the slip up and say, I've got, Ben and Carl or whatever. That's a preference thing. It takes a little bit longer, but not a meaningful amount of time. But if you're going to bother to ask their names, do keep their names straight. Don't call the person the wrong name. And then the other part of your entering is collecting info. This is where you let the players talk to you. So, hello there players, what can I help you with today? And then they tell you, hey, I drew my card for turn, and then I played my land, and then I went to combat, and then I remembered I have a saga that didn't happen. Cool. That part should be super easy unless the players are very, very contentious with each other, which does sometimes happen. Don't be afraid in those scenarios to sort of, you will have your turn, I'm going to hear from him, and then I'll hear from you, and then I'll repeat that back to you. But in general, this should be very quick. The players are going to tell you what their issue is. Sometimes it's, I need Oracle text. That's fine. Which takes us out of our beginning part to our middle part, which is delivering our ruling. So I always start with repeating back to the players what your understanding is. So, cool, I'm just going to confirm this with you. My understanding is that you drew, you'd proceeded into your turn, and we have missed a saga that was supposed to happen. Does that sound right to everybody? You want to repeat that back to them, partly to make sure that they are agreeing on where we are, is the biggest thing. One of the players is going to tell you the story. Sometimes the other player just sits there quietly, but might not agree. Repeating it back to them and saying, hey, do you confirm this, is giving them a chance to say, actually, I don't think that's quite how it happened. Or if they both agree, then cool, now you know you're working with all the correct information. So after you have confirmed your info with the players, you know everything that's going on. You've peeked at the board state, you've done all that stuff. You want to confirm your ruling. At competitive REL, that might mean you need to go check with someone else. So this is the point where you might decide, like, hey, this is a GRV and I want to do a rewind. Or you say, this is a hidden card error. Players, I have to go check something. I will be right back with you. Go check with your team lead. You can sandy check with another judge if you want to, or if it's just you or you're certain and it's an easy thing, you just confirm it to yourself, and then you move on to, delivering your ruling to the players. So, if you're assessing infractions or penalties, you need to communicate that to the players, not using any acronyms. Don't tell a player they're getting a GRV. Some of them know that, and it'll be fine, especially if they play a lot of events. But some of them will not have a clue what that is. It took me a long time to get good at not doing that, because I would be standing there telling players, be like, okay, you're going to see a warning for an HC, and some of the players just kind of stared at me like, sure, whatever, until the first one was finally like, I don't know what that is. Right, hidden card error, sorry. I like to lead in with infraction penalty, and then fix, partly because that's sort of how the IPG is laid out, but also because it gets in their mind the notion of this fix is associated with this penalty by leading with the penalty. You're telling them, hey, this is a game rule violation. This is a warning. Now here's how we fix it. So the next time they get a game rule violation, they understand this is in the realm they're working with, because generally after you've given them the fix, they tend to tune out. As part of delivering that fix to the players, you want to really make sure you walk them through stuff first and not have them start doing things. This is particularly just for rewinds and hidden card errors, but just in general, it's a good idea to walk them through what we're going to do and not have them do that. Don't physically stop players, because don't touch players, but very strongly verbally stop them if they start doing it. So if you're like, okay, we're going to put a random card from your hand back, and you see them starting to do it, stop them. You want to give them the whole thing we're going to do, reconfirm with them, that's good with everybody, cool, then do the thing. And that is the end of our delivering our ruling, which goes to the end, which is the part that gets screwed up the most. So that's my big focus for this particular mock tournament that I would like you to focus on, and in general, your next few events, think about your ending your judge calls. Partly because I was really bad at it for a long time. So when you end your judge call, the first thing you want to do, ask if they have any additional questions. At this point, keep in mind, we're already done with you're getting a warning, we've done our fix or whatever. Ask for any other questions. Do they have something related to this? Like, hey, we've rewound, do I still have to cast the same spell I ended up casting later? Because they might have questions like that. Ask them if they have any questions, and then you need to communicate to the players that they can begin playing again, which is probably the most important part of ending your call, is actually making it clear that we're done and they can do the thing. I've seen a lot of times where the judges will be like, okay, cool, here's your whatever, and then they grab the match slip, go over here, start filling it out, and the players just sit there for 2 minutes while you're filling it out because they don't know if they can start playing yet. You want to make clear to them, cool, if there are no other questions, you can begin playing again. I'll fill out the match slip. You'll have a short time extension to cover the time this took. Filling out the match slip should be the last thing you do. And any other ancillary check stuff you have to do. Maybe you got called over for marked cards and it looked a little sketchy, so you're going to go tell the deck checks team for a targeted check later or something. But all of that needs to happen after the players are playing Magic again and are done and all that. So now some related stuff to that, because that was a lot of me talking about that whole long process. Judge calls are going to take a varying amount of time. Obviously, you'll have more in-depth investigations for some. Sometimes you have to go get another judge. Sometimes the players are very, very argumentative, and so that takes a while to calm them down. But in general, the average judge call probably tops out at around 2 minutes. Obviously, you'll have longer ones, but that's about the top end. So that's something you want to keep in mind when you're taking your call. Particularly, I've noticed at mock tournaments, but even, as people get more comfortable in competitive REL specifically, there'll be a lot of really taking way too long to think through their call. You should think through what you're doing with the players. You want to give them the right answer, but as a very close secondary goal to the right answer is the expedient answer, which is you need to get them playing. The players have called you over because they cannot continue playing without you. The goal is to get them playing Magic again. So don't stand there Googling and everything for 15 minutes because you're not 100% sure, you either check with someone else and get back to the ruling, or if it's just you, give them the ruling and check it on your own time, get the players playing Magic again. Like I said, that 2 minutes not a hard cap, but it should give you an idea of how long you've been spending in the call. And if you've been standing there for way too long, it's time to just give them something and go. Which doesn't always sound the best, but that is the reality of it, is you're gonna not know sometimes, you're gonna make mistakes sometimes. You just gotta do it and get it out there and sort it out later. If you check after and you're wrong, go back and tell them, that's its own thing. But in general, it is best to keep the call moving along. That is my general outline, and now I am opening up for questions and also best practice stuff from other people, because that was basically all my version of like what works for me, but that isn't necessarily saying that is the only right way to do something, right? So Clint?
One thing to note, on the time thing, in your script, it's not going to be something that you say to players, but sort of when you start, before you greet the players, you should note the time.
Yes.
Just to make sure that you have that in your mind, and try to write that as step 0 of your script. Second thing, I loved what you were saying about communicating the fix before executing the fix, because I've had players be totally in agreement with me. Like, okay, is this what happened? Is that what happened? Yes. Okay, great. We all agree. Here's the penalty. Here's and everybody agrees. And then I say, here's what the fix is. So he's gonna look at your hand and take a card from your hand. Wait, no, I want to appeal. And so if we had started doing, the fix, okay, we're gonna do this, we could get the game state into a weird place, and then they're going to appeal, and I might get overturned. That's a bad situation to be.
Right, particularly for HC and rewinds, because in general, if I come to the call and they already started doing the rewind, it's gotta be real atrocious for me to not finish that rewind. Even if I think it's wrong and we shouldn't have, we already started doing it. As part of a lot of that, you're giving more information and you can't take that back. So a lot of times you just have to finish it. So if they get halfway through a rewind and then the player's like, oh, I want to appeal, they're probably not really getting an appeal. Unless it's, ultra atrocious, but that's, fraction of a percent. Ben?
So one thing that I think helped me a lot is realizing that I used to have a different mindset of like how to take a call in a Friday Night Magic versus how to take a call in a Grand Prix. And you don't have to have a different mindset at all. Like, please, like when you're at FM, just go ahead and like treat every call like you would at the floor of a Grand Prix or at a Stars. Hey, how may I help? Go through that whole process, go through that whole speech, and if you are working on the infraction procedure, you can even be thinking in the back of your head, like, obviously don't apply that penalty, but like, okay, what would I do if this was competitive? You can kind of be thinking about that. And so that's something that I found that kind of maximizes my time as far as getting experience that is treating every night.
Yeah, and particularly for our region, but in general, that is one of the big things we're really working on for L1s is like running really, 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 really good in-store events. And part of that is when you're taking your judge calls, taking them seriously. Not the sort of wobble up like, what'd you do wrong? Sure, do this, walk away. It helps you practice your script to just do it like you would do an actual judge call if it was a Star City or Grand Prix, because it doesn't really take much more time at all, and it will help you build credibility in your communities if they see you taking all these calls seriously. Yep.
Just hypothetically, how would you go in a situation where the two players don't agree on what's going on in the game?
So that's one where, and I kind of glossed that because it's difficult to always say because they're going to be so different in every call, but that's generally just in collecting more information.
Okay.
So player A says we are in combat, player B says we're still in his main phase. So that's when you want to ask the questions of like, okay, well, what did you say specifically? What was your response specifically? How long did it take between action A and action B? And then ultimately that's your, informed by, the documents and everything, but that is, ultimately sometimes that decision is going to be with you. The players aren't going to agree. Your job is to tell them what reality is if they can't agree on it themselves. You're like, this is the world we are working in now, and we are going to go from there.
You can also rely on their neighbors or even spectators who are there as well. It's every situation is different.
Yeah. Take that with a grain of salt, always potentially, if it's their butt standing behind them. But
100%.
one of the other big ones that I had in my head but forgot to mention was when you're collecting information, that's going to vary, right? What information you need. I know there's the mantra of every call is an investigation, which is yes, they are, but they're not all the same. Sometimes there's no advantage. They clearly just did a bad thing for themselves. Whatever, we're moving on. The one question I would encourage you to always ask is whose turn it is, because that can wildly change your answer. And I've definitely had to do the I don't know the term I'm looking for. I had to look really bad to the players. When I got halfway through my call, I made my decision. I was like, all right, cool. It's going to be a this and a this and a this. And I'm explaining the fix. And then the player's like, oh, no, it's my turn, not his. And I was like, oh. Oh, yeah, we're not going to do that then. I was wrong. Sorry. And it looks awful. And it also wasted, I spent 3 minutes figuring all this out and walking through it. And then was wrong and had to redo everything. So, yep.
The other thing is, so one of my mentors in the program, he's a big fan of taking time to process, which is cool. There are not a lot of players that if you go, hey, I have the information, I need a minute to look over the IPGA or the infraction procedure guide, make sure I give you guys the best one you can. A lot of players are going to be super appreciative, but you don't want to head into analysis paralysis, which is where you're oh gosh, this could be a GRB, this could be another. At some point, you do need to get these players playing magic again. And so, at the end of the day, if you rule something as a game rule violation that should have been a CPV, it's I'm not saying aim to make mistakes, but a lot of the time, getting the fix, getting these players playing Magic again is going to be more important than spending the next 10 minutes figuring out what category of warning this should be in.
Right. And you got to think about how that time damages your event. It's very tempting to think I have to, if I give the wrong ruling to these two players, I will damage their event for them. If you spend 20 minutes trying to figure it out, you are damaging the event for the other 600 players in the hall who have to sit through that time extension now. So that there's always that balancing act. Ben mentioned telling the players I want to take a second to double check this. I would advise you all to figure out your stall tactic and find a good one. Mine is always, okay, I think I know what we're working with here. I want to just check something real quick. And half the time I don't even pull up anything on my phone, or I pull up MTG Familiar and it's just whatever card I was looking at last. It's a good way. It can look bad to players if you're just kind of standing there blank-faced because you're processing. So it creates a better image to them if you seem to be looking something up, even if in your head you're actually just rethinking through everything. Yep.
Yeah, kind of a weird question. How would you go about because as a judge, you want to appear confident. You want to, when you deliver a ruling, you want to be this is what it is. I could be wrong, but everybody has the right to an appeal. But what phrasing would you personally use if you wanted to be I want to double check with a head judge or another judge to make sure what I'm about to do makes sense? How would you go about that without with minimal loss of reputation? I guess?
Right. So I've got, is that response? Yeah, go ahead. I have mine, but
One thing I'll do is I will look at the situation and if I'm not 100% on it, I'll look there and the situation's a little bit unique. Let me, I have a very good idea of where this should be going. Let me double check this with somebody, and then we can, get you a ruling, get you paying back.
Yeah, that is almost verbatim. The important word I think there is double check, because that sort of implies like, I know what this is, but I'm just going to get confirmation. And even if you go talk to another judge and be like, oh no, you're wrong, the player never knows.
Right.
Until you actually start telling them what it is, they have no clue what you're thinking. So like, I'm like 90% sure this is what it is. I just want to double check one little detail real quick. I'll be right back to you.
And to follow up on that, if you are wrong, you don't tell the players that you were wrong. You walk over, if you think it's a game rules violation, like he drew 2 cards per turn, right? Like, oh, it's a game rules violation. You're like, I'm really not sure. I want to go check on this. And then you go and check on it, and they're like, no, that's a hidden card error. You walk back over. You never told the player it was a game rules violation. You walk over and say, all right, cool. This is a hidden card error. This is how we're going to proceed to fix it.
Yeah, they have no idea that you were waffling and wrong because you only present that to them. Which is another reason why, like, when you're collecting that information and making your decision, don't do that out loud. I've seen it happen at mock tournaments, but that's because it's a different environment, right? You're trying to talk it out with people. But when you're at the table, don't be like, okay, so they drew extra cards, but was the root of the problem actually the spell resolving wrong, or was it the extra like, don't say that out loud. You keep that in here and only give them when you're ready.
And to add on to that, if you're going to double check with another judge, do it out of earshot from the
Yeah.
players.
Yeah.
And remember your table number, which is a minor thing I added in, but like,
I mean,
it'll come up that you'll forget.
Or you can grab the match.
Yeah, pro tip, if you're going to walk away from it to double check, or if it's an appeal, take the match slip.
Yeah.
Is there ever a reason to, say you're in a top 8,
Mhm.
semifinals in the top 8, you make a judge call, match is tied at 1-1, your call ends the match,
Mhm.
and you walk away, and you realize you're wrong. And had you made the correct call, the match would have ended differently.
So
You feel bad.
yeah, big feel bads. The important thing, and I think this is a really important thing just for maintaining like integrity of the judge program, go back to them and explain that you were wrong and why you're wrong. They're going to be really upset. They're going to be upset with you. They're going to be upset with the event. But at the end of the day, the players have the trust that, 1, we will put the effort to figure it out and make sure it's right, and 2, we'll let them know. Because the thing is, if you make a ruling that functionally causes a player to lose a game, they're going to go home and figure out if that was right. Like, that's 90% been my experience with players, is they're going to go home, they're going to hop on Google, they're going to find what you said it was, they're going to figure out if you were wrong, and if you never address them, they're just going to think that you're an idiot and you got it wrong and you don't even know you were wrong. Coming back to them later can show that, like, the mistake's at least not going to happen again, which helps keep some of that confidence.
Another important thing to note is that if you are a judge, you will get calls wrong. This is independent of how good you are as a judge, how good your rules and policy knowledge is, how good you are at taking calls. If you judge enough events, you will get some calls wrong. If you judge enough events, then some of the calls that you get wrong are going to be important game-changing ones. This is a heavy kind of a thing to talk about and a heavy thing to think about, but it's also the reality, and if you're not comfortable with that happening to you, then you probably shouldn't be, judging high-stakes tournaments, because you are a person, people make mistakes, and the process that you use can be an extraordinarily good one and an extraordinarily consistent one, but it is not a 100% thing, and so this is a reality that you should mentally prepare yourselves for. Talk to any of the experienced judges here. We'll all have our horror stories of times when we mess something up. So,
Yeah.
If you're real lucky, you'll get on Reddit.
yeah. That's how you know you really.
Or you'll get blasted on Twitch. Or Twitch chat.
Yeah, the Twitch chat was another good one.
Part of your opening, you talk about walking up to the table and saying, "Hi, players. How can I help you?" That kind of thing.
Mhm.
You said there was some pushback for "Hi, friends."
Yes.
Well, how do you feel about if you know the player
Mhm.
and you use their name? They're the one calling you. You walk over, you say, "Hey, Steve, what's going on? How can I help you?"
So I try my hardest to avoid doing that. just because you don't want to have that look of partiality to the player. Those are definitely scenarios where you can sort of strategically check with another judge, where I'm taking the call, I'm 100% certain, but I tell the players I'm going to go confirm with someone else, because when I walked up to the table, I walked up and my friend Chris was sitting there, and Chris was like, oh, hey, Jeff, I have a whatever. The opponent already knows we are friendly on some level, so that's one where I'm like, I'm going to go check with this other judge. The other judge is going to confirm because I already kind of knew. I'm going to come back and deliver it, and that can help sort of calm their fears that I'm just ruling for my buddy.
I mean, I've definitely had calls where a friend of mine's playing, and, I say, hey, players, how may I help? I do the call, and then I'm like, they get the match up, and right. So, and your name is? Like completely, like,
flagrant, yeah.
yeah, like, I was like, yeah, I draft at your store all the time. I'm going to pretend like I don't know who you are because I want to do that impartiality, because, like,
And then there's also knowing your setting. So like, if I walk up to a table and I happen to know the player calling a judge, but I also know the other player,
Right.
then it's not as big of a deal. That's going to be more likely with your FNM scenarios where, you may be the judge at the store and everyone knows you by name and you know them by name. That's not as crazy because you all have that same level of connection. But if I'm at a Grand Prix and I walk up to the table and I'm like, hey Jeff, how can I help you? Like, just that word help there can have a whole new meaning. Hey Jeff, what can I do to make you win in this situation?
Right.
That we don't want.
And do keep that in mind locally with like, at some point, if you're doing a bunch of FNMs, you're probably going to know almost everybody. So like half the matches you walk up to, probably you know both the players, it's fine to use their name. Just keep that sort of professionalism habit in the back of your mind so that if you go up to a match that has a new player and someone you know well, you don't accidentally slide into that. It's part of having those good, the good script and the good habit is it keeps you from making those little slips here and there.
One point I like to make with this is there was a gym in the Cincinnati area, and we were at an event in Columbus. Walked up to a table with a friend of mine, walked up and said, hey, how can I help you guys? And then after the call, he approached me, he's like, hey, why'd you ask for my name, like, at the end of the call? Like, you know who I am. And I looked at him point blank and I said, when I'm wearing the judge shirt, I'm here to assist you as a professional, not as a friend. And so it's making that distinction of like, yes, we are friends, yes, we're gonna go get dinner and have a drink after this, but I'm here in a professional context, so I'm going to treat you as a player, not necessarily a friend.
Right. And that, not necessarily related to taking judge calls, but related to that, because it is a good thing to keep in mind as you're doing events. If you're working a big event like a Star City, and like we're all huddled around, we're doing the Judge Black Hole thing, and someone makes a call, and you recognize that player, maybe send someone else. Or you're working deck checks, and they pull the random table, and it's a good friend of yours and someone else, maybe don't check their deck. It's just little things like that that just can help avoid any potential bad press.
Or maybe do check their deck.
And then give them the game loss anyway?
Well, I mean, like, check their decks because if you're intentionally avoiding deck checking your friends, then, like...
This is assuming there's a second judge that's also checking with you, because that's you usually pull in teams. Context.
Don't give them a pass. Just say, I'll take the guy I don't.
Right. I'll take the other
Like,
one.
it'd be like, no. I want to make sure you're on the up and up. I know you as a player, and not even like if they're like not if they're a shitty player, but like as a judge, and if you know your like friend or your local player, you kind of want to like. We hold our friends to a higher standard than anybody else. So you're like, I want to make sure you're doing the right thing, and want to make sure your deck list is perfect.
I love what you were saying, Jeff, about being aware not just of the 20-minute call and how it affects the players at this table, but how it affects everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Steven, your example of, well, why did you ask me for your name? I didn't ask it for you. I asked it so that the other player knew that I didn't mix up your names when I wrote the penalty. I wasn't asking for you, I wasn't asking for me, I was asking for them.
Right.
Right? And it's And it's not just the other player, right? It's the level of professionalism that you bring when you're observed by your team lead, by the store owner. Even if you're doing this at an FNM, and you want to, you want to bring a level of professionalism, you're selling the judge program to the local store owner.
Yep.
It affects everybody around you how you do this.
Yeah.
And I love that sense of awareness that you brought to it, Jeff.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to focus on with this, as opposed to, I very much glossed over the, make a decision part, which is typically what you think of as the bulk of a judge call, right? You get all the information from the players, you think about what the penalty is, and you give it to them. We kind of glossed over that because everyone knows that that's important to get them the right answer. It's the rest of the stuff that tends to slip. You go up to the table, you're like, here, it's a whatever, and then you just wander off. So, yeah. Anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns? Maybe not random strings of profanity because this is a family store, but...
Kind of going back to Clint's level 0 of the thing, also make sure you're calling your judge calls when they raise their hand.
Yes.
So the other judges around you know exactly who's taking that call.
So we're not all sprinting.
Yeah, usually when there are multiple judges approaching a call, they all kind of have situational awareness because all the judges are standing up, all the players sitting down. If Jeff is going to your call, he's moving faster than me, I'm going to disengage so I can basically buffer for any other calls that are here.
I've definitely seen it happen though when we're a bit thin though.
Yeah.
And somebody said, like, if there are multiple calls that come up at the same time, I might, if I don't realize that you're taking a call over there and I heard you go up but I went over here, I might try to tag another judge and say, hey, there's another call over there, go get it. And if I don't realize that it's just like bolstering that.
Yeah, I definitely do point to players. They don't always notice, but the thing is, especially in a big busy hall, is like Dalton makes a call and Steven makes a call, and I'm the judge. I'm moving this way. They don't know which one I'm going to. Whereas it's to confirm to them, like, I am coming to your table. You don't need to keep screaming, I see you. Because otherwise they will keep yelling. I've definitely had players still screaming, judge, looking around as I'm like 3 feet away walking towards them.
And that's a very specific one because, like, as Jeff's walking over there and I'm still waiting for a judge, they don't see his hand still. They're like, oh, Jeff is taking this one, and then he just walks right past me.
Right.
And that's a very specific situation, but, it's just communicate with the other judges, like, recognize hand signals, like, hey, you take this one, I'm going to take that one, kind of thing.
It's a little piece of nonverbal communication.
Right.
And then something else from a little bit earlier, this was your question. You mentioned what happens if, you want to offer an appeal. Maybe you weren't 100% sure on your ruling. Number one, try to appear sure on your ruling. Make sure the players have that confidence in you. But if the player seems to be questioning or maybe doesn't understand the situation, you can always offer and say, hey, this is my ruling. Would you like to take that up with the head judge? And you don't have to do this for every call because whoever the head judge of the event is going to hate you. But when that player seems like, and especially if it's something larger like that, like that this might change the game, you can say, hey, this is my ruling, but I understand the importance of the situation. If you would like to speak with the head judge, I can go get that for you. And a lot of times, when they offer, they might say, yes, that would be great, thank you. And then you'll go grab the head judge. Or they'll say, no, it's fine, and then at that point, you have a better understanding of, okay, great, I did explain it well enough for you. You may just be processing, okay, where do I go in the game now?
Yeah.
I had something when it comes to the hand signals. Try not to point with one finger. I know at Star Cities we've started either using like almost finger guns with like the 2 fingers or use your whole hand because a lot of the hard pointing they're trying to move away from it because we can signal each other with, if you happen to have somebody from another culture, there's a lot of times where they're just like, wait, why did the judge just point at me? Because like in their culture, that's a really rude thing to do to them. So I know that on the floor, SCGs specifically, they've been like, use at least like the 2 fingers to be like, I'm going to that table.
Bring the aircraft in.
Or the whole, like,
Steven and then Ben.
One important thing with the player being like uncomfortable with the ruling or whatever, don't wait for them to use the exact word appeal. sometimes it comes as like second opinion, or I'm not sure about this, or they may just uncomfortably flip their cards in their hand. You can be like, would you like a second opinion on this?
Right.
And that's it's. I've watched players want to appeal, but they don't speak judge lingo, so they don't know that like the word is appeal. Also on the note with appeals, if you walk up to a table and you're in the middle of delivering your ruling and the player says, I want to appeal that, you tell them to wait for you to finish your ruling before they can, they're not supposed to do that.
Right, because if
be firm on
they hear
that.
something they don't like,
That's
you have to finish
an
it.
actual USC penalty. But it's all about each situation is a little bit different. And as you do more, you can start to categorize them in this player is uncomfortable. This player knows what they want, but they don't know the verbiage. This player is you give your ruling, they're like, I want to appeal. And never feel bad about getting appealed because you can give the most accurate, the best ruling, and they still want to appeal you on that. You can get partially appealed on a call. You can sometimes just completely blow it. And never feel bad about it because one, that's a chance to help the player, trust in the integrity of the event in the judge program. And then two, it's also a chance for you to fix any incorrect knowledge you may have.
The thing to remember is that once it goes to the actual appeal, that ruling is then final.
Yes.
So make sure it doesn't go to appeal if it's just getting a second opinion.
And don't leave the appeal.
Yeah, you should stick around and make sure you're right. We're gonna wrap up, but quick, yeah.
So quick thing is, just keep in mind that the appeal is the right to speak to the head judge. If you are the head judge,
They don't have it.
You can, and I definitely see that. Hey, I am the head judge to the event. There's not going to be a process past me. I understand that you're unhappy with the ruling. We can talk about this later, but for right now, my ruling is final, and we have to keep up the measure.
Yeah. Brief thing. Offering appeal is not part of my standard script because, like you said, it wastes a bunch of time. But you can offer it if it seems like they're unsure or whatever. I would just, something I worry about a lot is I would just watch your tone when you were doing that. I have a pretty serious face judging, I guess. And I've definitely felt like the way I've offered appeals to people was too intimidating. The thing of that is my ruling. If you would like to appeal, you are free to do so. Comes off a little much as opposed to that is going to be my ruling for the table. Of course, you always have the right to get the head judge just to double check and make sure if I was correct or not. Just trying to soften that up a little bit so that it doesn't seem like you're bullying them into accepting your ruling when they really want to appeal. And that is my presentation.